Hey, what's up, everybody? Today I want to talk about something that I've changed my mind on over the last 20 some years. Something that I used to feel pretty strongly about, and now I'd say, well, circumstances have changed and just getting older and situations kind of evolving have made me really rethink and change my mind on. Now, before we get into this, I want to note that this isn't going to be some deep dive into code or code theory, so if you're looking for that, that's not really what we're going to talk about today. Just drop a comment down below and say, hey, Jason, get back to more code, please. And then hit the thumbs up and hang on because this is actually going to be a really interesting video. So what is it that I've changed my mind on? Well, it's really going to come down to hardware and how I get computers or how I build systems. I used to have a very strong view on how things should be put together, what you should do, and what the right way to set up a system was, especially for a game developer. And now that's changed. I've had a couple situations come up that I want to talk about that have completely changed my mind on it, but there are still some interesting caveats I want to dive into, some issues with the new mindset that I've got as well. So if you've ever, thought about getting a new computer, you're thinking about getting a new computer, building one, maybe ordering one that's pre-built, then hang on because that's what I'm going to dive into today. I want to talk about the experience of building one yourself, why I used to love it so much, why it used to be my only way to build things, and why I used to think that buying a pre-built system was just the wrong thing to do. It was a bad thing to do. And why, well, my last system was pre-built. I'll share my multiple disasters that came up building my last system, especially during this supply shortage, and talk a little bit about what I would do differently, give you a little advice for building your own system. And if you don't need that, at the very least, it'll be entertaining finding out all of the terrible mistakes that I've made along the way. But before we get into the video, this video is sponsored by Milanote. Milanote's my favorite tool for organizing creative projects into freeform visual boards. Lately, I've been using Milanote to plan all of my projects because it's really easy to use and so flexible. When I come up with video ideas, like this video, I use the mobile app to save them off onto my videos board. It's great for keeping track of ideas, tracking my progress, and for inspiration. Milanote can be used for all different types of creative projects, but I find it especially well suited for game development. You can create task boards, add freeform text and images, store code snippets, and a ton more. Milanote just released a huge update, which includes a great drawing tool that allows you to draw your ideas out right onto the boards. You can also add video and audio to your boards, add documents, and customize the toolbar so you can make it better fit your workflow. Milanote offers a completely free plan, so whether you're building a giant 3D RPG or a small little 2D platformer, I definitely recommend you go try it out. Check it out by clicking the link in the description below. I want to start by going back to one of the first computers that I ever owned. Now, I'll skip the first one because, actually, I guess the first and second, which were Commodore ones, a Commodore 64 and a VIC-20. They're really cool systems, or at least they were way back in the day, but they used tape decks, they weren't customizable, and they don't really apply here. The one that I want to dive into was my IBM PC that came out right when Castle Wolfenstein 3D did. So it was the first time that a 3D or 3D-ish game came out. And I was 15, so as you can imagine, I was really excited to be able to play it. And this IBM PC let me do exactly that. And this system was great. It worked well for quite a while. I think it was about a year and a half or so before I actually started running into problems. The first problem that I had was that newer 3D games were coming out, and my system just couldn't keep up with it. Luckily, back in the day, just like nowadays, it wasn't too difficult to upgrade your video card. So what I did as a 15-year-old with no idea what I was doing, just following the advice of my buddy Mike, who was loosely telling me what to do, I went to the store with my birthday money, went up to, I believe it was Egghead Computers at the time, which I'm pretty sure turned into Newegg long afterwards, which I still order stuff from. It's kind of weird now that I think about it. But I went up to Egghead Computers as a little nerd that had no idea what I was doing, put down my money, and bought this giant video card, this big, long VESA mount video card. I brought it home, opened up my computer, took the top off of it, because at that time it was just a square or a rectangle, popped the top off, and you could see all of the different card spots, just like you can see, well, you can't really see them in my board right now. If I change the shot, you'd see them in my motherboard. Just like that, but you'd see them from the top, and I went to put my card in, and I was like, hey, these things, this doesn't line up right. Like the slots aren't lining up at all. So I sat there for a little while looking around, all confused, went back to the store, and then realized that, oh, my motherboard, which I guess was, I had learned at the time, was that big piece down at the bottom that all the stuff was plugged into, didn't have those ports. It had newer ports. It had I think it was the VGA ports. Oh man, what was it? AGP port. No, it was the one right before PCI ports. I think it was just a regular old PCI port that it had. It's been too long. I've lost track of my ports. If you remember that, drop it down below, though, if you remember which port that was in the 486. So anyway, I had to switch out video cards, got a new video card, brought that home, and suddenly I was able to play things. And I was just amazed. I was like, hey, for a tenth of the price of this computer, I'm able to upgrade the video and now do the new things. Of course, those new things were really games like Doom and Quake, and of course, my favorite, EverQuest, which really took advantage of hardware and really needed me to upgrade. I think I upgraded my system 3 or 4 times just for EverQuest alone. Doom and Quake, I'm sure I upgraded a couple times for as well. Adding memory, swapping out hard drives, increasing the CPU power, or swapping out CPUs completely. I remember when you used to be able to swap out one CPU for another onto the same board, totally different brands, and switch them out, and they had totally different price points. Anyway, that kind of got me into the mindset of building my own systems. I realized that I could save money, I could get a little bit more power, and I could make it easy to upgrade. I had a lot of friends who had pre-built systems, and they would get these computers that weren't really customizable, and they couldn't be upgraded. The cases would be tiny, you wouldn't be able to put in a new video card, or the things would be soldered on or locked on, or in some weird configuration like one RAM slot or maybe 2 DIMM slots later on. And seriously, some of them had 1 slot on them. They're just really bad designs that made them not easy to upgrade, because those pre-built systems, well, the builders of them want you to buy a new one. They don't want you to upgrade it and keep that one for 10 years like I was used to, slowly kind of cannibalizing one computer into another and building these Franken computers. So let's fast forward. Over the last 2 decades, I've probably built 20 or so different computers, all PCs that were either for myself or kids or friends or family or even at work. And these computers have done great for me, even up to my very last one. The last computer that I built was about a year and a half ago, right around when all the supply shortages started to hit. What happened was my old system had a motherboard failure. The entire thing stopped booting. It wouldn't turn on. I tried swapping parts out, nothing would work, and the whole thing was just dead. The board was dead. It was a great AMD system with I think it was a 3900 in it. It was really fast. It was awesome. Had a 1070, some good RAM, and some drives. I was able to salvage almost everything out of there except for the motherboard and the processor. So I pulled out everything, went up to the store, went to buy a motherboard and processor, and they were out of boards and processors. Or actually, I guess they were just out of boards. They had processors, the 3900 series, but they had no boards because the new ones were about to come out. They did, however, have Threadripper boards, and I thought, well, I need to get something working. I've got to get something up and running. It's going to cost probably about double to get this Threadripper set up, but I'll just do that. We'll get it. It'll be quicker. Maybe it'll save me time in the long run. It'll make exporting videos faster and compiling faster. Hey, that's the argument that I at least had to use for myself to justify it. And it was fast once I got it set up, but that setup process was not easy. It was no longer this simple, straightforward, quick process that I had gotten so used to in the past. So there were a couple of reasons for that. One was that the Threadripper processor and board is a completely different socket, so obviously it's going to fit in differently. But one of the things I didn't think about was it doesn't come with a cooler. So it doesn't come with a cooler built in like all of the other AMD CPUs. They have a cooler in the box that just kind of pops on, fits onto the board, and it didn't fit my other AMD coolers that I already had. So after getting it all set up, going to set on the cooler, realizing there wasn't one, and then going, okay, well, I'll take my old cooler, put it on there, realizing, oh yeah, that's not going to fit either. These aren't even close to the same size. Having to go back to the store, and this is a long, long trip I have to go up to Micro Center, which I have to say, I'm very happy to be able to just drive an hour to Micro Center and have it be an option. If you've never been to Micro Center, it's like an awesome nerd computer store. It's only available in a couple spots, but really great place if it's available. But long drive either way. spend the whole day driving out there and back just to get a cooler, bring it home. Cooler doesn't fit in my case. No! Because, yeah, I too distracted, too many things going on. And this is what happens when you try to like emergency build a system, try to emergency put stuff together. And I realized at the time that the amount of time and energy I was using to build this system, I went back to Micro Center 2 more times after that, getting parts and getting things that I had missed, upgrading my power supply, upgrading all of the things that I didn't realize I was going to have to change out when I swapped out the board. So overall, it took me, I think, a total of about a week before that system was up and running. So it was down, no YouTube videos, nothing else working for at least a week, just trying to get this thing figured out. Now, what happened? Why am I not using that system anymore? Well, because as I was building that in a rush, I didn't do, I don't think, a very good job. I think that I probably shortcutted quite a few spots, and I was going relatively quick and getting frustrated and having a somewhat difficult time building it. And when it was done, I immediately started seeing problems. The first one was just with the fan control. It wasn't working properly at all, and the fans were just constantly ramped up, which I'm sure you can imagine when you're trying to record YouTube videos is a giant nightmare, just having these fans blaring nonstop. Took me a long time to fix that, and I was only able to fix it by forcing the fans to stay low. Of course, later on, it started having other problems, and as of 2 weeks ago, only half of the RAM in my system was showing up. I remember we were doing a live episode of the GameDev show talking about systems and talking about system specs. I pulled up my memory and saw, hey, I've only got 32 gigs showing up of my RAM. So 32 of the 64 that were installed in there. It was beautiful, bright, flashy, fancy RGB RAM, just not working because who knows, something's going on that board or something with my terrible install. It used to work, the RAM was there before, just wasn't showing up anymore. Shortly after that, I saw that my system was having some stability issues. It just randomly rebooted. In fact, it was literally the next day. So Sunday, I saw the RAM issue. Didn't quite get around to fixing it. Monday, I saw that my system had rebooted. Didn't get a chance to dive into it because it was really busy. And then Tuesday, I came back and nothing would boot. The system would boot, but I couldn't get into Windows. I couldn't get anything to work, and it was having quite a few different errors popping up. I tried to recover things. I looked around trying to see if I could maybe restore Windows, get back in, install it on another drive, but I had 2 drives with Windows installed, and neither one of them would boot, which led me to believe that this was more than just a boot issue or more than just a hard drive issue. Well, that and the other errors that were popping up. Long story short, I ran out of time debugging. I spent maybe 2 hours trying to figure out what was going on. Actually, it's probably wrong. Probably closer to 6 or 7 hours trying to figure out what was wrong, how I could fix it, and how I could get the system back up and running so that I could get to working. I mean, I got up trying to record early Tuesday morning and nothing was working. So I had to get it fixed. Eventually, I thought, you know what? Last time I built this system, I thought to myself, I don't want to do this next time. I thought, I want to have something that somebody else has built where the cooling is set up. It's kind of already figured out, and I don't have to deal with a cooler that doesn't fit into my case, or I've got to pop the fan off, or fans that ramp up and I can't control them, so I got to force them down, or even just getting in there and spending the 3 days building up the system because I'm relatively slow. Thought, I don't want to do that. I don't want to try debugging this anymore, and realistically, it's probably going to knock me offline for at least a week if I do. So that's it. I'm going to try buying a pre-built system, and that's what I did. I went, all right, I'm buying a pre-built system. I'm going to see what the best thing I can get quickly is, order it up, and then I'll compare. Maybe I'm going to hate it. That was kind of my thought. I was like, maybe this is going to be terrible. Maybe it's going to be the worst decision. I'm going to be like, oh, I should never do that again. But maybe it'll be like the way going forward. So let's start with my process for picking one out. I really only had 2 criteria. I wanted it to be faster than what I was replacing because nobody wants to replace the system with something slower. That would just feel bad and kind of suck. And it is for work, so I can justify the cost. And I wanted it to get here quickly. So first thing I did was hop onto Newegg and just click the get free next day shipping, and then search for something that had an RTX card in it. And I specifically searched for a 3090 only because I knew the difference between the price points on the 3080 and 3090 pre-built systems wasn't very big. So I figured I would hit apply, and started looking around. There weren't very many options, and the one that I ended up going with was this Skytech Prism 2, which, to be honest, I actually kind of like. There are a lot of really cool things about this system. You can kind of see it right there, and if I push the camera over, you can get a better view of it. It obviously fits my style visually. You can see all of the RGBs, and there are actually 9 fans on there. I don't think you can see them all in this shot. It's got a nice little remote control that lets me just change the colors and change the modes, which I thought was awesome. The other one that I had allowed me to do some of the same things, but I needed to go through an app on the computer. And to be honest, I just never do that. I never use those pre-built apps to go in and customize the colors. I'll set it up once and then leave it. This little remote, it's just, I think, a better option. I wouldn't have guessed it. I wouldn't have guessed like, hey, I want a remote for the lights, but now having one and seeing it in action, it's definitely something that I like. And one of the coolest parts about it, the little fan buttons. I can just control the fan speed right there. They auto ramp and they seem to work and do what they're supposed to. But if I want, I can just override them if I need to make them shut up while I'm recording, or if I just feel like they need to be up higher or something. So I'm overall a big fan of the case, the RGBs, and some of the hardware. But I want to talk a little bit more about that because while I am excited overall about the system, I like the design, I like the way it looks, and the fact that it got here the next day and it just worked and pretty much was issue free. There are a couple little things that popped up that bothered me and that I've run into so far, and I've only been using the system for a few days. So the first problem with this system was really in the specs, and it's the fact that it just didn't come with enough RAM. They had an option with slightly more RAM, but I thought, hey, I'll just pop my old RAM into this one. I won't need to worry about it because it only came with 16 gigs of RAM. Now, 16 gigs is probably enough to do most stuff, to do most development. But when you're going from 64 down to 32 and down to 16, you start to notice it, especially when you're working in really big projects. If you're not working in large game projects or doing a whole lot of stuff at once, then it might not be an issue. But for me, it was kind of a big problem. So it's one of the first things that I wanted to upgrade. But when I went to put in my RAM, what do you know, that RAM doesn't work. So the RAM in the old system, part of the dead stuff. So the board, the RAM, I don't even know what else is dead in there yet. I haven't even gone through the full debugging process. So outside of the RAM, what else is it that I don't particularly like about this? I guess really in general, it's just the entire motherboard. The one thing that I wish was a little bit better was the built-in, just the board, all of the features on the board. I would have gladly paid another $100 or $200 for a board that had more NVMe slots. This one has 2, which is good, but the previous board that I had 3, and I think that at this price point, 3 would be good. I'd like to have a couple more RAM slots, ideally 8 instead of 4. 4, I guess, is kind of normal, but again, at this price point and with a high-end GPU and a high-end processor, I wouldn't mind having 8 RAM slots. In fact, I'd really prefer it. But even if I'm not going to fill up the RAM slots, the one thing that I'd really like to have on this board is Bluetooth. The fact that when I went to hook up my Bluetooth headphones, there was no Bluetooth built into the board, and I realized I'm going to go have to either dig out or order up another Bluetooth adapter because the Bluetooth adapters, I don't know if you've seen them, they're always these little tiny things that snap right in and then they get pulled out and lost and I'd never find them again. So I'm going to have to find another Bluetooth adapter, and it would have been nice to have just a board that had Bluetooth and Wi-Fi built in. It's got Wi-Fi in here as an additional card as well. So I think that's kind of the only real issue that I had with it. Outside of that, again, it came in almost perfect condition. There's a little tiny dent on the glass, but I mean, I'm not that picky. It doesn't bother me. And yeah, one of the fans was popped out when it came, but I popped the fan right back in. It worked fine. Looked like it was probably just something that happened in shipping. Overall, though, I've got to say that I'm a fan. I like the system, and I will probably do something like this again. I think that the next time that I buy a system, the next time I upgrade a system, I want to do it when I'm not in kind of an emergency state, when I don't have to hit the free next day shipping, and I can choose a board and, like a full system that's exactly perfect, exactly what I want, and kind of pre-design it so that I don't need to get in there and do more stuff to it. In this one, the only thing I've done to it so far is add in a hard drive. I took my old 980 Pro, popped it into here, which one other thing, if anybody from Skytech happens to be watching, it would be really nice to have another NVMe standoff and screw in there so that I didn't have to order some on Amazon to get that drive in there. I went to put it in and realized I didn't have any, and my old board had them built in, so there was no standoff and screw that I could pull off. It was on one of the old Asus boards, kind of built in with the heatsink. So anyway, long story short, I'm now somewhat sold on pre-built systems. I'm not 100%, but I like the idea of not having to build it myself, not cutting myself up anymore, not wasting a whole lot of time, even though it costs a little bit more money. And to be honest, you also get the benefit of it's one of the only ways to get the high-end GPUs. Now you can get the 3070s, 3080s, and 3090s in pre-built systems, even though they're kind of sold out everywhere else. So if you're looking at building the system, I don't know. This one, again, super pricey. I'd probably go with a better motherboard, but I kind of liked it. Not sponsored by them or anything. But this video is sponsored by my favorite tool, Milanote. So get started organizing all of your projects completely free by simply clicking the link in the description.